idiot, last night I went and left the fuel on and it's dribbled on the floor. So I could be rebuilding that carb sooner than I thought, because it's definitely, I'm not sure it should be doing that. So yeah, it's absolutely flooded the engine. You can see the fuel sitting in the back of the airbox there. There's the carb. It seems the overflow. There's that thing. And it dumps down that tube. So I think that's what's been leaking out under the airbox body and covering everything in all this grime. All pretty basic. Undo all the screws and get me into the float chamber and see if the needles perished. There's a bit of grit in the first pot. It's not squeaky clean in there either. It'll clean up though. And now I've got to get the float bulb pin out. That little pin. So I'm going to try and use one of these spikes and just gently tap it in to get the pin out. And we're all apart. There's quite a lot goes into these little carburettors actually. I'll just run through it. We've got the airbox and the airbox screws. Let's move over to the actual throttle. So there's the throttle slide, the rod that clips into the throttle side, the end cap, spring and whatnot. There's the fuel inlet pipe and bolt. Here we've got the idle air fuel mixture screw. We've then got the main jet and the pilot jet. Here we've got the choke plunger and choke jet. There's the offending item, the needle valve that controls the fuel flow. And the float, and then the float chamber top, and the what they call, I'm guessing, the top hat. And I've seen mentioned when these let's just sit it back on right. There's a couple of adjustments you can do with these. The top hat bit, grind or file a tiny bit off of this and you get a bit more screw purchase. So the screw's got a bit more bite down onto the gasket, if that makes sense. You can see there it's sat in the centre of that and rocking around, so there's not much space for the gasket to compress, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. The other thing is, I did see it on this one. I'm not going to see it now, am I? Where is it? Ah, on this corner. It's hard to tell, but the airbox rests against it, and sometimes the airbox resting against it dislodges it slightly, and then you end up with fuel vapour leaking into the airbox and flooding the engine. So I'm going to file a very fine bit off the edge of this as well. I've only got a tiny ultrasonic cleaner. It's for jewellery really, but they're really inexpensive and do quite a good job actually. I'm going to be mixing white spirit mainly and petrol cleaner by Red X. As you can see, it's actually about the right size to get the Vespa carb in the body of it anyway. You can't get the whole thing submerged, but it's going to make a start at least. Looking a lot better now it's been through the ultrasonic cleaner. Just a bit of pitting in the bottom of the float chamber. Shame, but can't be helped. As I got bored waiting for certain things to get washed, I decided to like polish slightly. The airbox lid hasn't really, filter lid hasn't really worked, but yeah, I started trying. You're never going to see it because it's hidden under in the airbox obviously. Also managed to do the airbox, give it all clean as well. Had all the rubbers out and cleaned all around them, so it's looking a lot better. freed the adjuster off because that was seized up. So now it's a case of putting it all back together. See if this makes a bit more sense now. I did in the end file the top of this down ever so slightly, just the top of it, took the height down. So now the top hat bit, there's less wiggle room, so in theory it can squash down on the rubber gasket much better and reduce any likelihood of a fuel leak around it. And here we have it, all back together. The air filter, I've just gone to put it back on and discovered it wasn't sitting flat, it was sitting at kind of an angle like that, so that it wasn't actually sealing round the intake. And it's obviously done that for a lot of years because it was just the casting marks on the side hadn't been cast quite right or cut quite right, so it wasn't sitting right well. So what I've done with just a burring tool is created a bit more space along there so it wasn't fouling this side of the body, and it sits on nice and flat now. Perfect. Remember or watch the SIP unboxing video where there's loads of these plastic bags. The whole carburettor assembly's fitted nicely into one of them, so it's just going to keep dust and moisture out of the carb till it goes back on the bike.